Hi, my name is Sasha Struthers. I'm an employment and landlord-tenant attorney here in Los Angeles. And today I'm doing a video on why people should come forward if they feel they're being harassed, discriminated against, or retaliated against. And simply, the reason why people should come forward is that when you speak up for yourself or even speak up for others, it sets precedent for the amount of tolerance that one will or will not take in their lives. And in California, which has some of the strongest anti-harassment, discrimination, and retaliation policies in the country, maybe even on the planet, I don't know. But they have very strong policies simply for the fact that employers and employees, landlords and tenants, both have different bargaining powers. And what that means is, if you are an employer, you have more bargaining power than the employee because you're the one who's going to be hiring the employee. And in California, it's an at-will employment state, so you can terminate the employee, except for illegal reasons being, it's either in violation of an employment contract or it's for an unlawful purpose, such as harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. Something similar with landlord tenants, although tenants have far more protections if they live in multifamily because they do have statewide and local rent controls. So here in Los Angeles, tenants have a lot of protections afforded them, but it's the same concept. The landlord has the housing and the tenant needs the housing. But I come across people who very often call me because they're being harassed. And this is more common in an employment setting. Sorry, something just flew in my face. This is more common in an employment setting than it is in a landlord-tenant setting. But it's not okay to harass anybody ever in general. It's amazing that we need laws for people to be told not to do that, but nonetheless we have them. In an employment context and landlord-tenant context, there's what's called the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which is governed and administered through the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. And under this act, tenants and employees cannot be discriminated against based on being part of one of many protected classes, the most common being based on sex, race, national origin, religion, disability, family status, being married or not married, having kids or not having kids, things like that. The more common ones tend to be sexual harassment is a big one. Race discrimination I see once in a while, and disability discrimination. That's more common in employment than it is in housing. Housing is a little more challenging, but for employment, that often comes in the form of failing to engage with the employee in a manner sufficient to work out whether the employee can stay and be transferred to another department or another position and maintain their employment. But without going too much into detail about kind of the underlying basis for discrimination or harassment, or retaliation usually being based on the employee exercising one of their rights, and same thing for a tenant, or standing up for someone, or threatening to file a complaint, things like that. That's I cover in other videos, but for this one, I kind of want to talk more about why it's very important to talk about these things and why cases end up getting filed. And the reason being, and I don't think it's common, I hope it's not common, but it does happen where people are being discriminated against. I will say more commonly again, employees than tenants. They're being discriminated against and they have a fear that they don't want to lose their job. And that's a valid fear because it's not always easy to get a job, and no one should fear losing their job unless they're doing something wrong. But I've dealt with predominantly on the defense side, dealing with the cases where I defend a lot were sexual harassment. And you see how afraid people are to stand up for themselves because they think that no one's going to believe them, or that they'll be retaliated against. And in many ways, if you're being harassed at work, you don't want to go back. You leave the company. And that's called a constructive termination, when you basically have no choice but to quit. When those things go undisclosed, or like people are not called out for that kind of behavior, then it continues, and then it continues more, and then more. And there's consistently cases being filed because this is the kind of behavior that consistently happens. People are sexually harassing people, they're discriminating against people, and you can't do that when you're in a position of power above these people. And that is why these laws exist, and why I find it so disheartening when people don't come forward, or they're afraid to, because they think no one's gonna believe them. And really, it's the employee's word in a case, and even a tenant's word in a case, it's a lot stronger than the employer's. The employer has a burden to prove on themselves that they haven't done it, which is somewhat hard to do. But if you're harassing people, there's usually proof of it, either by witnesses, by text messages, emails, voicemails. Photos are common. All of those are very common things. But if you have someone that's being harassed or discriminated against, and you have proof of it, you by all means should come forward, because it doesn't only protect you and your rights, but it also puts a voice to other people who are also afraid. If everybody wasn't so afraid, then I think people would be more cautious in their behavior towards others. And now I think people are more comfortable than they were before. But it definitely is something that when people call me, they always are kind of like afraid, like, is this worth it? What's gonna happen? I don't want any problems. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to move out. I need my housing, but I can't live like this. I'm being singled out. I'm being harassed, and it comes in different forms. But people should always, I think, come forward, and you should talk to somebody. There's government agencies. The most common way people come forward is usually through an attorney, and oftentimes attorneys will take these cases on contingency so that the employee doesn't have to pay out of pocket up front to an attorney, and so they're able to get representation in that sense. But I would think if people came forward more, or were more comfortable doing so, more and more people would come forward. And you see that now. More and more people coming forward and filing their cases really isn't a means to bring to light the fact that these things are happening. Because we live kind of in a system where if you're doing something wrong and in violation of something, there's repercussions for that. And when people don't get called out for it, they don't face many repercussions, and then they keep going. And then they keep performing the same behavior that is not appropriate. And oftentimes they might not even know to the extent how inappropriate it is, because no one's saying anything. And if you are afraid to say something, and you're the person that's being victimized in this sense, then yeah, it does help to have an attorney be a buffer, because you are afraid and you don't really want to confront someone and tell them this person's harassing me, or you're harassing me. It's a little challenging and a little uncomfortable. But I always encourage people, and I don't judge anybody for being intimidated or afraid, but having a desire to want to pursue their claims. People should do that. And on the reverse side, if you're an employer and a landlord, you should be mindful of your behavior and what you're presenting and what you're doing. sometimes people are just aggressive, and a lot of it is fear-based. A lot of it is ignorance. And then just some people don't have great personalities. So that is kind of my several cents worth of encouragement to people who are facing some sort of, again, harassment, discrimination, retaliation, that you shouldn't be afraid to speak up on your behalf or behalf of other people if you're being wronged in some way. And with that being said, I hope nobody is being wronged in some way. That's wishful thinking. But if you have a case like this, you should reach out to me. My phone number and email are available on my website, which is going to be linked in the description box below. And other than that, I wish everybody a lovely rest of their existence. Thank you.